In 1998, a man in Tucson, Arizona committed a crime with a handsaw. Early on a Sunday morning, while nobody from the city was watching, he walked out to the curb in front of his house and cut 6 openings into the concrete. It was against the law. A resident was not allowed to touch a city curb. He worked quietly and more than a little scared because he was not sure what would happen to him if he got caught. That one small illegal act is the reason a dead, sun-baked desert street in Tucson is now buried in shade, and it is the reason the city that could have fined him ended up copying him instead. His name is Brad Lancaster. What pushed him to break the law starts with what his city was doing with its water. Tucson gets less than 12 inches of rain a year. It is one of the driest cities in America, so it pays to move its water 336 miles through an open canal pulled from a shrinking Colorado River. That canal cost around $4 billion to build and tens of millions a year just to run, and it is the single largest consumer of electricity in the entire state. Meanwhile, the rain the city does get was built to be thrown away. Every street was graded to send rainfall straight into a storm drain. 1 mile of neighborhood street sheds over 1 million gallons of rainwater a year. More rain falls on Tucson in a year than the whole city draws from its taps. And for decades, nearly all of it ran down the gutter and disappeared. A desert dying of thirst, standing on top of the answer. Brad admits he was frightened the whole time he was cutting that first curb. What got him past the fear was simple math. The city was draining its aquifer by pumping harder every year, while paving over the exact ground that used to refill it. To him, a law that forced a desert to waste its own rain was not a law worth respecting. As one of his neighbors would later put it, illegal does not always mean immoral. That first cut was rough and crude. He was figuring it out as he went, learning by doing, half expecting a city truck to pull up at any moment, but nobody came. And in the quiet of that Sunday morning, a man with a hand tool did the one thing the whole system had been built to prevent. He let the rain off the pavement and into the ground. The idea itself was almost insultingly simple. When it rained, the street was already a river. The water just had nowhere to go but the drain. So Brad started reading the street like a watershed. Water runs downhill, so he found the high line and the low points, and he cut the curb where the runoff already wanted to collect. He dug a basin below the level of the road and let the street empty into it. When that basin fills, the overflow runs a little further and drops into the next one, then the next. A chain of small catches, each one planting a bit more of the storm into the ground. He called it planting the rain. Before you put a single tree in the soil, you plant the water. Then the tree has something to drink. It worked faster than anyone expected. His trees shot up, his bare lot turned to shade. And here's the strange part. The city did not notice for years. His neighbors did. They kept asking him the same question. Why are your plants growing so much faster than ours when nobody ever sees you watering them? So he showed them. He walked them to the curb and pointed at the cut. The water was free. It had always been free. It ran past every house on the block each time it rained, and the entire city had been trained to flush it away. If you like watching one person quietly outthink a whole system, subscribe to Comeback Atlas, because that is the kind of story we live for here. That left Brad with a choice. To spread this beyond his own yard, he could not keep working in secret. He would have to walk into City Hall and admit on the record that he had broken the law. So he did. He turned himself in and then spent 3 years arguing with the transportation department to make curb cutting legal. he won. And then it went much further than he ever planned. In 2008, Tucson passed an ordinance that did not just permit rainwater harvesting, it required it. New commercial buildings now have to supply at least half of their outdoor water from rain. It was believed to be the first law of its kind in the United States. The city began paying homeowners up to $2,000 to build the same basins Brad once cut in the dark. And in 2021, it launched an entire program called Storm to Shade to build this green infrastructure across public land all over the city. The outlaw's trick had become the building code. By then, Brad was not a lone vandal anymore. He was the teacher. A whole generation of desert gardeners across the Southwest learned to plant the rain from his classes and his books. People who sat in a room with him 20 and 30 years ago are still cutting curbs and digging basins today in their own neighborhoods, in their own cities. For a lot of them, the day they learned to cut a curb was the day a dry, hopeless street stopped feeling like a life sentence and started feeling like something they could fix with their own hands. Stand on that street now, and the numbers carry the story. Point an infrared thermometer at the open asphalt, and it reads 127 degrees. Step 10 feet into the shade of one of Brad's basins, and the ground reads 97. A 30-degree drop in surface temperature on the same street on the same afternoon. That gap is the whole game. Asphalt and concrete soak up the sun all day and hold it, turning a paved city into an island of heat that never fully cools at night. Shade and soil undo it. And the shade is not just shade. The Sonoran Desert has more than 400 native food plants, and Brad packed in as many as the street could hold. Velvet mesquite, whose pods grind into flour. Wolfberry, the native cousin of the goji. Barrel cactus fruit. Palo verde seeds you can eat like peanuts. What used to be a bare traffic island is now a working ecosystem sitting in the middle of an intersection. More than 24 native bird species have moved back into the neighborhood. On 1/8 of an acre, Brad harvests around 100,000 gallons of rain a year, and it never stayed on his block. His neighbors copied him one curb cut at a time until most of the street was doing it. Today, that one neighborhood holds dozens of these street-side basins and a string of small greened traffic circles, each one a little pocket of Sonoran Desert growing in the middle of the road, shading the asphalt and cooling the air for everyone who lives along it. The desert was never actually dead. It was thirsty. The moment the water was allowed to stay, the life came back on its own. None of this makes the heat a solved problem, and it would be dishonest to pretend it does. The law is not always enforced. Plenty of new buildings still let their rain escape. The summers keep getting worse. In Arizona's largest county, home to Phoenix, the summer of 2023 killed a record 645 people through heat. Nearly 2/3 of them were over 50. 3 out of 4 were men. That is the danger these desert cities are actually facing. And it is the reason a single shaded street matters more than it looks. Tucson did not build a machine or wait to be rescued. One person looked at something everyone had accepted, that catching the rain is illegal, and quietly decided not to accept it. Now the city that once outlawed his idea catches the rain on purpose, everywhere it can. The rain was always going to fall. The only question was whether anyone would let it land. If that is the kind of comeback you came for, subscribe to Comeback Atlas. There is a lot more where this came from.